Now we're going to have Wes come up from Heartland Farms. Heartland Farms is a sustainable farming operation, and they have worked very hard to work with us and to work on keeping the water clean. So they're exactly the type of partner we want to have. So we're very excited to have Wes with us. And he's going to show us about what they're doing in their farming operation. So let's welcome Wes.
Can you hear me back there? Okay. Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for the introduction. My name's Wes Meadow. I work with Heartland Farms. I've been with them for about 11 years, and I apologize, I'm just meeting the 14-mile group now. I actually live in the 14-mile watershed up by the headwaters, so I'm going to be kind of the point person working with those guys going forward. Grew up in the 10-mile, moved down to the 14-mile. A gentleman by the name of Tom Schultz that started to work with Kyle. Just my work schedule didn't work in the beginning of it, so eventually they'll get turned over to me. We've slowly started getting ourselves involved in these groups. Packers Group, Colette, we've started working with these guys a couple of years ago. We've had those guys to the farm working with those. We've also started a big initiative with the Russia Cree just recently. And I didn't comp out on giving a speech. What you're going to watch is a YouTube video of the president of Heartland Farms. He gave a speech in January, which was really good. I'm a PowerPoint guy. He's a Prezi guy, and I couldn't get it on my computer this morning after work to work right. So instead of me presenting, I'm going to have you guys watch it, and then I'll talk. I'll do a follow-up on it, and then open it up for questions after that. But what this is going to show you is kind of who we are, where we started, where we're at now, and where we're going, and kind of our thought process through that. And then I'll kind of follow up on that and open it up to questions. And it's about 28 minutes long, so if questions start building and you guys want to pause it and stop and do questions in the middle, let's do that. And I apologize, this happened in Dane County, so he still had to wear a mask at the time.
From the Central Sands area, I do want to remind you to stick around because all the conversation is going to happen shortly after Jeremy gets done. Jeremy Pavelski is the president of Heartland Farms, incorporated by Hancock. He is coming to the podium and going to show you a little bit, and I mean a little bit, about what Heartland Farms is engaged to do under his guidance for a while. It's not just about the individual components we're talking about today, nitrogen, for example, but it's a whole farm concept. It's a whole business concept that Jeremy and his employees at Heartland Farms are committed to. I'm glad I got a chance to see it personally, face to face. So come on up, Jeremy, and share your story.
So I'm up here to see my phone, it's just because it's a timer. If I don't do that, I don't know. But after so first off, I would like to say thank you to the UW system, well, I have studies here, regulatory agencies, the farmers who are here. This is absolutely fantastic. The River Alliance. What is really encouraging to me, and I think there's really been a dynamic shift over the last, I don't know, it seems like it hasn't been that long ago, probably the last 5 to 7 years, is that we're starting to see more of these groups working even more together. I mean, the university system's always been great, and we've collaborated a lot there, but 10 years ago, I can remember when we started some water quality initiatives in Washington County, and you know, we got the water groups together and the farmer groups together, and quite quickly that actually deteriorated. I mean, it was very surprising at how quickly that went downhill. Looking at it today, there's just a lot more collaboration effort. You know, we're working with all kinds of groups were talking about it. Lakes groups are also seeing that it's not just farming, and agricultural practices that have impacts on it, and vice versa. So for me, that's absolutely really encouraging. This is outstanding. I encourage anybody to do that. Let's, be adults and have good conversations. So anyways, thank you again for putting this on, because this is another way to do that. So, I'm Jeremy Pavelski, president of Heartland Farms. Thanks for introducing me, Pam. I'm a fifth generation farmer. My great-great-grandfather immigrated here in 1873. What I'm going to do here is go through a little bit of a quick history of our farm, just because I think it provides a little bit of background on mindset and what we do, and then talk about some of the technology and other sustainability practices, and then really get into water quality. And the reality is like Pam mentioned, all these things come together. And one of the reasons why is I look at water quality and overall sustainability as how much output can we produce with the quantities of inputs that go into it. And can we continually build upon that and make it better and better, making sure that we're also protecting the environment. So we can look at it from one aspect, but the reality is there's a whole bunch of things that have to come together to really make that happen in a greater form. So here's my father, and my grandfather's a little type over there. This is back in the 50s, where my great-great-grandfather emigrated on Amherst Junction, Wisconsin. Mountain John still farms there today. They were hand-picking potatoes and loaded up on the truck to take them down to the Chicago market for sale. This photo, and keep this one in mind, because we're going to show a couple changes over the years. This was fantastic. This is in 1990 when we bought our home location now. And it really converted that from a very unproductive farm into a lot different, I would say, and a lot more productive. We've always been very entrepreneurial as a family and as an organization. Back in the 80s, my father built a fertilizer supply company in Amherst Junction, and we actually developed some of the first variable rate technology that was utilized. Back then we didn't have GPS, we were using Loran, which was kind of the precursor to that, which was kind of cool. From a sustainability standpoint, 1994 we built our shipping location, and we really changed the whole dynamics of the potato industry for potatoes that go to process and shipping. Prior to us doing this and rinsing and grading out bad potatoes after they've been rinsed at the farm, all of that waste was going to major metropolitan areas, because that's where most of this potato chips or the French fries are manufactured. So we've taken all of that dirt, all of those potatoes, all the organic matter that we want to keep on the farm, and we're shipping it off there, it was getting washed, then it would go down the municipal sewer, which you got cost, you have all kinds of other environmental issues. So we take a lot of pride in having a history of really thinking outside the box and changing the paradigm on what agriculture can be or can't be. Recently, or this would have been in 2015, built what we call our Farm Operations Technology and Training Center. And we recognize that our team members need to be engaged, the community needs to be engaged. Technology is going to be one of the major driving factors for sustainability, for increased yields. But we also need to make sure that our team members can be up to speed with that technology, being able to utilize the best resources from training as well as the tech available. Here's our team right now, an overall ownership group. So it's not just my family. We actually have 3 families involved in the ownership of Heartland Farms. And we call ourselves a family of families. So we got my father, Dave Knight, some of the original founders from the Pavelski Farms to Heartland Farms. And TJ Kennedy earned in ownership over time. And we look at this as a group of families coming together to work together, have different ideas, thoughts, and how we can continually improve. So that's the reason why we call ourselves a family of families. If you remember that photo that I said, back from 1990, this is what our operation looks like today. So this is actually taken from the same angle. Our office, potato storages. Look at all those water features around there. That's actually hot water, which is pretty cool. Bountiful in our area. We want to protect it and make sure it's that. So quickly going over our core values, that's enhancing the opportunity of current and future generations, providing the proper tools and the training to our teams so they can be as successful as possible, increasing the awareness and understanding of agriculture, and we really take a lot of pride in that, collaborate with team members, communities, schools, government agencies to drive good policy decisions, exceeding our customer expectations, ensuring continued growth and profitability. And one of the most important on here is lead the way to help promote and practice sustainable farming practices. So I broke this down into kind of water, carbon, wildlife, and innovative technologies that we're looking at. And again, it's really a systems approach to doing all of these things. We'll start out with carbon, and I'll move through this relatively quickly. But we do have about 95 kVA of solar photovoltaic cells on top of our main office. You see our main office there, and there's a heart. It's actually my wife and I had it line one night. Thought it was a great idea, and that's how we have our logo is the heart. Variable frequency drives, which really reduce the overall electricity consumption for irrigation systems, storage facilities, shipping operations. And I'll talk about remote monitoring in general a lot more. But we do a lot of remote vehicle and equipment monitoring, and the reason why we do that is we create reports and we benchmark our teams. So we look at idle times, total miles per gallon, total miles used, and we actually benchmark our teams in the fields. It says if operator A and operator B are using the same type of equipment, doing the same function, the same field, the same soil types, then shouldn't operator A and operator B running about the same amount of fuel consumption? If not, and one of them's more efficient, well, what's he doing different so that operator B can learn from him? The first year that we started employing this, we ended up saving 40,000 gallons of diesel fuel across our operations. So it's one of those things that we say internally, you don't know what you don't know. Until we had the technology to prove it out, we didn't think about it. Nobody was doing anything malicious. We didn't leave vehicles running to have high idle time because that was the intent. It's just like, hey, you go out to a field, you're doing something, leave the vehicle, right? So it's nice and cool. So, work with efficient LED lighting. Again, we ended up changing our whole operation over this with focus on energy. First year savings over $100,000. I mean, just absolutely amazing types of things that you can do with a great program that the state has. I'll talk about more of this here when it comes down to technology and innovation. So we do a lot of data collection. Anything from structured data going back to structured data going back to the 90s for what kind of nutrients, how much were being applied for all the majors, the micros, correlating that back to yield, from the seed source and all of that. And the reason why that's really important is because you can then benchmark yourself. Am I making improvements or am I not making improvements? Can I utilize a different type of nitrogen source? Because not all nitrogen is the same. Or is there something that I can do to really enhance the overall quality and storability? Because if I can store this longer, if I can produce a higher yield, well, then I don't either need to produce as much per acre, so I can reduce the total amount of acres, or just overall more efficiently. We do a lot of data analysis. We're kind of unique that we actually do our own software development in-house to be able to benchmark and track all of these things. We haven't found any good software out on the market to be able to do it, so we said, hell with it. We're just going to hire a dev team and do that. I'm very biased when it comes down to technology because I am an IT geek. I do program, I do write code, and all of that myself. So the IT team is, we're a farm. They're kind of favorite because of that. We also do electronics design, system controls, a variety of innovation, working with both the university systems as well as private potato breeding programs. That's again looking at different varieties of potatoes. It says, okay, can we reduce the inputs for it from a chemicals, from a fertilizer standpoint, water? Can we get higher yields and meet consumer demands? Right over here is a picture of Eli. He's one of our pork holders. I won't talk about this one yet, but if anybody has any questions, I'll give them that later. That's kind of interesting. But going into water quality here, this is something that we developed. We created a spin-off of Heartland Farms called Heartland Tech, just looking at specifically technology. This right here is a controller for our fertigation tanks. And what this does is it allows us to get remote information to see how much is being pumped, how much isn't being pumped. Through this process of developing it, we actually found out that most of the fertigation tanks on the market here are, not accurate within 5 to 10%. So what we did then is we took this and we said, now that we have this data, we're going to just develop our own. So last year, we gutted every fertigation tank that we had. I worked with the rest of our guys. We developed new code that's a lot better than it was in the past. So the reason why I bring that up is I know that when Matt was talking and the others were talking, what is the accuracy and how close can we get to having accurate information, accurate measurements on what is being applied? And we've really taken the approach of almost lean manufacturing, and quantifying all of these things. And having this remote data is really important. Here's another piece of electronics that we designed that goes on the end guns of our irrigation systems. We're eventually going to market these. Who's gotten annoyed at end guns or irrigation systems watering the road? This will help with that. I know it's created a lot of controversy. It's not the primary purpose of it, but it will also help with that because it tells us if that's happening. But this tells us if the end gun is functioning properly, is it moving back and forth fast enough for it to actually apply water evenly? Is there an issue with the solenoid where it's not getting the right pressure and so on and so forth? So, that's another one of those things that if you're not getting proper water application, you're reducing yield. If you're reducing yield, you know why. And it comes down to overall total nutrients being applied. Talks a little bit about the variety development. And here's some other new technology that's really neat. So it's called Prospera and Valley Insights. But there's cameras on each one of our irrigation systems, but quite a few irrigation systems from last year. Whenever that irrigation goes around, which is quite often in the central sands, it's taking very, very high resolution images and then utilizing AI algorithms to determine whether there's a health issue from a nutrient deficiency, from a water deficiency, or if there's pest issues. In this particular case, it's hard to see, but right there in the middle, that's a Colorado potato beetle that was identified by an AI algorithm. We're getting those reports every single time that pivot turns around. So from a sustainability standpoint, again, if we can get up there and we can make sure that we're doing good integrated pest management, but we make sure that those pests don't reduce the yield, then we don't need to apply as much fertilizer, which means that we have less potential for leaching and so on and so forth. Specifically when it comes down to water sustainability, we use very efficient irrigation systems. I'll still get the remote control, and I'll talk about these here with the photos. So for each one of our irrigation systems, we can control it remotely with an iPad or with a computer at our office. So what is the significance of that? One, we don't have to drive out to every single irrigation system, so we're reducing miles traveled, where people can spend more time with their families. But if there's a heavy rain event coming, we can select all the irrigation systems and we can turn them on. So that is, really reducing the potential for that leaching event. If we see that there's going to be heavy winds, and if there isn't a cover crop out there right now, we can turn those on, get a lap of water, get it applied relatively fast to hold that soil down. Soil is an investment. We do not want to lose that. And we also try from that soil standpoint to get a cover crop on as quick as we can. You can't do no-till with potatoes yet, but what we've done is, historically, we've applied cover crops within 48 hours after we harvested. But we're actually doing that a little bit different now, where we're aerial applicating it just before we harvest the field, so that we can get a jump on that, because we're getting late enough in the year, we'll let cover crop get established. So even a few, 3-4 extra days is a big deal with cover crop. We started doing that, I think we were probably some of the first ones to do that. We started doing it 2-3 years ago. Automated rain gauges. So there's enough variability from field to field for how much rain is actually getting onto the field. So every single irrigation system we have has an automated rain bucket. Also the significance with that. So it's pretty simple, right? It's just a little thing tips back and forth and it tells us how much rainfall. I can react 1 hour, minimum 1 hour faster, usually about an hour and a half, from turning off all our irrigation systems. Because I don't have somebody having to drive around to all the fields and tell me how much rainfall there was and was it substantial enough to meet the needs of the crop. Over 300 irrigation systems, an hour alone, that saves 18 million gallons, 18 million gallons of water for 1 hour per, for each rain event. So very, very substantial from an overall water quality or quantity. And by turning those irrigation systems off quicker, we're also helping to ensure that we're outreaching. We also utilize variable rate irrigation, and it's not on all irrigation systems, but if your soil is very variable, and if there's heavier soil, throughout the field, and lighter soil, as it would kind of show over here, then we're utilizing it where each nozzle on the irrigation system is actually controlled independently. So it's not the whole irrigation system that's applying water. Here's a good example. This is actually one of our fields, H7. It's just to the east of our headquarters. And the lighter soil is going to be the reds, and the heavier soil is going to be the blues. And here's the total difference in the water being applied to that field for that. So the lighter soils had 15.8 inches, the heavier soils had 9 inches. So you're looking at a substantial difference in total quantity. But we can also now, we're starting to variable rate nutrients on them. So if we know that these heavier soils are going to hold more nutrients, where you can either apply it and then not apply anymore because it's still available, or applying even less amounts on that lighter soil and more frequently, then you really end up getting that win because we do in the potato industry spoon feed the nutrients, at least 50% of them, through an irrigation system, which is why I talked about the fertigation and trying to get that accuracy. Because if you got 5% error, 10% error, and you're applying 50% of it through the irrigation system, that can add up quite a bit of pump. So let's make sure that we got the equipment as accurate as possible. So this is a photo of an irrigation system, and by saying we control it independently, each one of these nozzles right here that's applying water can be turned on, turned off, or it really pulses really fast. So if you need a ½ inch of water over here and a ½ inch over here, it's going to be pulsing to limit that quantity. So it really gets granular. It doesn't work for absolutely every soil type, but again, if it's really consistent, it's a waste of money. This stuff is expensive. Each irrigation system is about $70,000. So it's definitely not cheap. Love working with the university system. We've also worked with on design, and I think Paul might be part of that. But anyways, on what's called a flux tower. And there's a lot of models that predict how much water a crop is utilizing based on solar radiation, temperatures, humidities. What this does is this measures actual evapotranspiration. So we know exactly what that crop is utilizing. This is really going to help us dial in the models as well as say, okay, how much water needs to be applied. But by doing that, we can also really try to hone in and ensure that leaching doesn't occur. Right now, this isn't quite as real time or quite as robust as it will get to, but it is in the stages where it is going to start providing a lot of benefit, in my opinion, over the next couple of years. So the other thing would be variable, row shutoffs for equipment. And take a look at this. The circle would represent an irrigated, never irrigated area. Well, up until about 5 years ago, for the potato and vegetable industry, we didn't have shutoffs like you do anymore. It's a lot more complicated. So what you do is you'd end up planting, you'd continue to plant where those yellow areas are, and you'd also apply fertilizer to them. And by doing that, what we'd end up doing is that about 3 weeks after the potatoes start coming up, you till it down over in those edges where it's not irrigated. So it's not irrigated, you have quality issues and so on. Right over there for our farm alone, saved over 100 acres of seed improvement. So you can imagine that stuff that would have probably reached. I'm not going to say would have for sure, but pretty high probability. We also utilize buffer zones. So here's a stream that ends up going to our farm. We've had 30-foot buffers around those for probably the last 20 to 25 years. Really important from my standpoint, I really love the fact that the water that comes into our farm through these springs on the east side is lower current load on the west side of the exits. So it's something that we take a lot of pride in. We utilize petio samples for any of our potatoes. And what that is you're actually going out to the field every 7 days. You're taking a tissue sample, you're sending that sample into a lab and seeing what the nutrient content is. Based upon that, we get a new prescription for every single field, every single 7 days. And that's how we're coming up with how much nutrients are applied. So, we're not just taking it out there doing 1 application, 2 applications. This is very intensive. As soon as that comes up to the point that we get to litigation, you are utilizing this data to make those decisions. For wildlife, we also do no-mow May, which is really for pollinator habitat, because May is one of those times that there's a lot of pollinators out there. We stopped tilling our dry corners about 3 or 4 years ago completely. And we do still mow, but that was still there for me, the wildlife. We have quite a few ponds for fish and other wildlife around our farm. The added benefit to that is we do have a stock of fish. So our team members go out there, spend a lot of time fishing. And the bald eagles love it. We have forested areas and buffer strips. This photo here on the right is actually my daughter out there in the corner of a potato field picking flowers. So it's not just about, it is about doing what's right. It's also seeing the enjoyment. Her eyes, the fact that she loves being out there and enjoying nature and all that good stuff. One thing that I really also appreciate is all the initiatives on farmer-led watershed groups. We just started up in one of our main watersheds, the Rozier Creek. Got funding for that here earlier this year with the DNR. I give a lot of credit to Anna James from our county because she's been fantastic with it. But with that, there is one thing that Matt Brewer said, and I think it's just absolutely true. Every field is unique. And there's absolutely no doubt about that. While we won't necessarily get down specifically to the field level, I don't know, I think we will. These farmer-led watershed groups are getting to small enough areas that at least you can talk about it. You can talk about the things that work over here or not over there. Because you have different production systems, you have different vegetation, you have different streams, you have different personalities even, in these different watersheds that you can do great things if you're working together and you get that formed. And I think that's probably one of the best programs that I've seen come out in quite a few years. And it is gaining traction because everybody wants to do good. I mean, it's not that you don't want to do good. It's one, you don't know what you don't know. Two, I mean, there is a cost to doing these things. Margins are low. We're fortunate that we've been able to grow over the years, but you're looking at 10% maybe, compared to a normal investment. Hell, right? Anybody who's not saying that would actually do it. But at the same point in time, we've got to look at all of these sustainability things. And I think it's great. It's the right thing to do. And we need to push that. But per capita, America spends the least amount on food compared to any other, well, not any other country. I think there's like one that beats us. But we do. I mean, our system has been designed to provide cheap food. That's what it is, which also means it's low margin. So, going to your point, having a change in that thinking, can really prove substantial benefits in the long run, providing the mechanisms and the funding to do that. That's really the 10,000 foot level. To put some dollars and cents on one last thing, even building a 130-acre field, off of production agriculture into pasture, I look at that for 130 acres, we actually pull the field out of that to turn it into wildlife habitat. We're going to be doing that this year. One of our least productive fields, you're looking at between $850 and $1.2 million, at least in our area. So, that's substantial dollars, and it takes a heck of a commitment, and it takes a heck of an investment in being able to do that. So, how do you end up balancing that? I don't have the answer, but I always just like to put some of the dollars and cents to things that The last thing I wanted to mention really quickly is Heartland Farms, the Pavelski family, as well as a whole bunch of other growers in the area, started what's called Farming to the Future Foundation. And their goals are really to educate consumers, to the general public, about food production and strike out that dialogue. I mean, these are the things that happen. We need to talk. We need to understand each other, not just the farmers one way or another. We have a really big project. It's not in the public fundraising point yet, but if you do want to check it out, go to www.fftf.us. In about 2 months, maybe 3 months, once we hit a certain goal, it's going to go public, and there's going to be some really wild stuff happening in central Wisconsin, and we'll have some announcements with that. But I'm talking, there's some really cool big things going on there. Yeah, with that, thanks again for the invite. Thanks for taking the time to listen to that one up here. And again, I really think that this is a great forum, and thank you.
Okay, that was a pretty good rundown from Jeremy on kind of where we're.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Finlayson. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce Kenzie Clark.
Cover crops are part of the conversation. We can talk about that in Texas too. So that's kind of an overview of where we're at. Like Jeremy said, when I first got to the farm, we had one IT guy. We have 7 of them now. So we do a lot of work of our own on the technology side, and that's what's gotten us to where we're at. It's a learning curve, but the water thing, 2 things we need, otherwise we don't exist, is land and water. You got to take care of them both, otherwise we're done. So, and as Jeremy said, you know, our big push now here in the next couple of years, and it's been over the last decade through learning and trials and tribulations, is the variable rate irrigation, variable rate fertigation, figuring out how to keep our water, our fertilizer on our field where it belongs. So that's kind of one of our big goals here over the next few years, minus keep improving the land. So I know that was a long 28 minutes. If you got a question, let's go to questions first, and then I can start talking.